Zion Vishnupad Paramahansa Prabhupada Episode Vastatara Satasi Sivan His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anand Kushti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Prem Sikho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srila Sari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Syamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Sri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mayi Ki Jai Jamuna Mayi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru Gauranga Gaur Premanande Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Satarane Nivasesha Sunyavadi Prashkati Dev Satarane. Om Gyanatiminandasya Zinanjana Salakaya Chaksu Sudaratanjana Tatsmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manavistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapandantikam Vansakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaivata Praditram Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. If you insist.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Welcome all of you for today in this wonderful program. And it's our great fortune that we are having with us the Bhurijana Prabhu. So, give a short introduction of Prabhuji. So, he was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1968, and he and his good wife, Jagattarani Mataji, in 1970, they opened ISKCON's first Hong Kong center. Throughout the 1970s, they met Srila Prabhupada in Japan, Hong Kong, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, Hawaii, many places they were both preaching, and we see occasionally many places in Prabhupada Giramrit also, the name of Prabhuji comes, preaching in that very difficult area where Prabhuji was there. And in 1976, Prabhupada asked Prabhuji to focus on teaching, and then he taught for 7 years in US, and then he founded the VIHE, that is Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, where now varieties of devotional courses for devotees they are taught, and then many people they register and take the advantage of the scriptures given to us by Prabhupada. And then he is writing currently and many books like Japa, Surrender to Me, The Art of Teaching, and the overviews of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then his Lotus Feet and Backward Glance. And he is currently writing a final volume of Cantos 5th and 9th, 5th to 9th in the Bhagavatam series. And now at Govardhan, he is for all the devotees for their coming to Govardhan and experiencing the shelter of Govardhan. Prabhuji is working very hard to establish center there, retreat center for the devotees. That is currently Prabhuji is doing. We are very grateful that he has come here for 5-6 days. We'll be hearing from him. Prabhuji is very known for his japa workshops all over the world, and devotees are also very eager. So we'd like to thank and express our gratitude by loudly chanting Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Sundar Chaitanya. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I'd also like to welcome you all. It seems like that the classes that we'll be giving for today and the next 2 days are not the japa classes. Don't worry, I'll talk very loud. But there's 3 classes on one very special lila in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and there will be. I've called this seminar "One Story, 4 Truths," but of course there's unlimited truths that can be taken from this one story, and there's a subtitle on this seminar of One Story, 4 Truths, and it has to do with using the Bhagavatam's wisdom, this ancient scripture's wisdom, to perhaps guide us and help us through life's difficulties. Now, when we're 5 years old or 6 years old or 17 years old, or when we're very young, we have a dream about our life. And this dream is that if I can just move the things that I want close and just move the things that I don't want far away, that I'm going to be so happy. Sundar Chaitanya, Betty, story. Please come in and sit down. But somehow or another, life mixes within the happiness that we get. And this is regardless of our situation, whatever body we're in, whatever situation we're in, whatever country we're living in. Life always seems to present some difficulties to us. And what to do about these difficulties? How to deal with them? This takes great wisdom. Hare Krishna. But you don't have any asanas to sit on? Yes. Better to sit on an asana than the cold floor. How to deal with the difficulties of life. How to deal with the difficulties of life so that they bring us closer to our actual goal, the goal of our life, not take us in a further direction away from what we actually want to achieve in life. This is, to me, an essential point. How to deal with the difficulties of life in such a way, the complex difficulties of life, in such a way that they don't bring us further away from Krishna, but they bring us closer to Krishna. Because when we're in a difficult situation, there's unlimited ways we can deal with that situation, practically speaking. But not all ways are equal, not all ways are good. So, to help guide us in this, and practically speaking, all issues of our life, The great sages of ancient times have written so many wonderful books. Bhagavad Gita, of course, and the one that we're going to speak from for the next 3 days is the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada, you can just imagine how important the Srimad Bhagavatam was to Srila Prabhupada, that he didn't feel himself comfortable to travel on what boat to the United States? Jalaluta, until he had the first canto of the Bhagavatam. And I've heard it said, I didn't hear it directly from Prabhupada, but I heard that Prabhupada had said that when he wasn't sure that he was going to finish the entire Bhagavatam, so he put everything in the first canto, all the essential truths in the first canto. And then he had also said that I wasn't sure that I was going to finish even the first canto, so I put everything into that first volume. And I also heard he had said at the same time that I wasn't even sure that I was going to finish the first volume, which is basically the first 6 chapters of the first canto. So I put everything in the first 3 verses of the Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada's purports there are very powerful, and indeed they do contain everything, but in seed form. And a seed is meant to grow into its actual fruit. So the whole Bhagavatam presents the ripened fruit of the Vedas, Nigama Kalpataru Galitam Phalam, and it also presents the Ashraya Tattva, the actual goal of all Vedic studies. And that goal of all Vedic studies, the goal of all knowledge, the goal of our existence, is to awaken our relationship with Krishna. So, how to deal with life's difficulties? Now, I'd like to begin with this pastime, which is about Narada Muni and his life. I would like to begin with an occurrence that takes place later in the Bhagavatam in the 7th canto. In the final chapter of the 7th canto, does anyone know how many chapters there are in the 7th canto? Who said that? 15. Very good. Thank you, Prabhu. What is your good name? Thank you, Prabhu. 15 chapters. The first chapter of the 7th canto is an extremely important chapter, which Srila Jiva Goswami cites in his Bhakti Sandarbha, that explains how important it is to focus our minds on Krishna. He uses the verses in the first canto, first chapter of the 7th canto to explain Raganuga Bhakti, the bhakti where we're spontaneously attracted to Krishna, where our consciousness is focused on Him, and we see nothing but Krishna. What an incredible consciousness this is. So how to attain that consciousness, or an example of that consciousness? And almost the rest of the 7th canto shows us practically for the first time an ideal example that we can follow if we want to be Krishna conscious, if we want to achieve love for Krishna. And that example, of course, is Prahlad Maharaj. It's interesting that in the Shringa Purana, it concentrates on Lord Nrsingadev, because his appearance as the avatar is so wonderful. But in the Bhagavatam, the concentration is actually on Sri Prahlad Maharaj, because his consciousness is so focused on Krishna that he can't be disturbed in any circumstance. And in fact, if you want to understand Prahlad's consciousness, or how when his father, his own father, who is naturally his protector, is trying to kill him, and he's not in anxiety. You have to read Prabhupada's purports in an earlier chapter that describe how he's seeing Krishna everywhere at all times. And when he doesn't see Krishna, he cries. And then when Krishna comes into his view again, he begins laughing just like a child. He is a child. He has that innocence. But if I'm not careful, I'm going to get distracted and only speak about Prahlad Maharaj. Well, I want to speak about Narada Muni. But then, later on, starting in the 11th chapter, Maharaj Yudhisthira, who Narada Muni is speaking to in the first chapter, Maharaj Yudhisthira asks the question, how can we attain this consciousness? How could our consciousness become illumined and so pure that we are always focusing on Krishna? And then Narada Muni describes the Varnashrama system. But at the very end of that canto, in the 15th chapter, at the very end of that 15th chapter, Narada Muni describes something about his own life. But it's not as his life as Narada Muni, it's as his life is Upabarhana, who is a Gandharva, a celestial singer. Now we'll read some of this. It's a very short section, but please listen. Narada Muni is speaking. He's speaking to whom? I said, let's see who is listening. Who is he speaking to? Everyone's listening. So nice. He says, Aham pura bhavam kaschit Gandharva upabarhana. So long ago, in a previous Mahayuga, a millennium of Brahma, thousands and thousands of years ago, he existed. And it's so interesting to think that thousands of years ago, each and every one of us also existed, but in a completely different body, a different circumstance. If you or I actually fully accepted that simple point, which is the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, if we actually lived in that way, understanding that we are nitya, ajo nityam shashvatoyam parano. What's the next line? Anite. Oh, amongst learned sages. I feel very fortunate. Just how our life would change, how our perspective of what good is and what bad is, what is important and not important, how our life would change, and how our mood, and even preaching would change completely. And we would be I think we'd be very compassionate to see the amount of ignorance, the depth of the ignorance in the world, the increasing depth of ignorance in the world. So in any case, Narada Muni is explaining his previous birth, not his previous birth, but a different birth, a long time ago. He said he has existed as a Gandharva named Upabarhana. And he said, I was very respected by the other Gandharvas. Being invited to a festival. Whoops. Why was he respected? I had a beautiful face and pleasing, attractive bodily structure. He was very good looking, he was very strong, and decorated with flower garlands and chandan pulp. He decorated himself. His natural beauty was enhanced with his decorations. He was most pleasing to the women of my city. And thus, he says, I was bewildered, always feeling desires to enjoy. So he had some gifts. He had some piety. And that piety caused him this attractive, talented features. But just as every coin has a heads and a tails, a front and a back, that along with the gifts, if they're not used properly, there will always come a curse. And what was the curse of looking like this and being so talented is that he was filled with desires, material desires, selfish desires. Now, this to me is a very important point, because every one of us, every soul in this world, and what it means to be an individual, practically speaking, is that we have some special gifts. This is explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in some comment in the 10th canto. We have some gift, and we have a way of satisfying Krishna, of offering something to Krishna that no one else has. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that because we have this gift, and there's unlimited souls who have unlimited gifts, therefore Krishna has unlimited abilities to satisfy and reciprocate with each of the unlimited souls. Now, in the material world, when the soul somehow or another, anadya bahimukh, Krishna Bule say, Jeev anadya bahimukh. When he somehow or another turns his back on Krishna, and since I'm already sitting in an easy way to stand up, I'm going to show you something of what I mean. Now this, I was just playing here, but how do you feel when the person who you're looking at, who has this microphone entangled here, turns his back on you? Now, I'm just playing, but if someone turns your back on you, well, how do you feel? Do you act, even though you know I'm doing it for a particular purpose, did that change the way your consciousness was? What do you think? Yes? No? Yes? Yes. Did it make you feel happy? Maybe it depends who's speaking. I don't know. So that soul with his gifts, he turns his back on Krishna, and instead of using those gifts to please Krishna, just like we see in the Ganga and the Yamuna, that we see devotees, they're in the waters, and then what do? They take a palm full of water, and what do they do with that water? They offer it back to the holy rivers. So similarly, what we're doing, practically speaking, is whatever gift or opulence we have, we're taking that palm full of opulence and offering it to the great vast ocean of opulence. And because it's done with bhakti paritam, Krishna is pleased by the offering. So when a jiva, a soul rather, when he somehow or another turns his back on Krishna, which means insults Krishna basically, and turns his back on Krishna, then instead of using his gifts or whatever opulence Krishna has given him in Krishna's service, he uses it for himself, as if we could ever be the center of things. This is what it means to have a false ego, to imagine ourselves as the center. And this is the first gift of Maya to us. When one studies the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam, in Kapila Muni's teachings, one sees that as soon as there is the pradhan, then the Mahatattva, Krishna's glance, and then immediately it begins to form. And the first thing that's formed is false ego, combining with the 3 modes of material nature, and based on ahankara, based on false ego, the whole rest of the universe proceeds in its creation. So the living entity, the soul, in the material world, every conditioned soul is covered primarily by this one thing. And in that, I think it's the 25th or 26th chapter of the 3rd canto, it describes a little different than how Krishna describes it in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. He says there's one there's one covering over the soul, the sukshma sharira, the subtle body, and that one covering can act as polluted consciousness, chitta, or it can act as false ego, ahankara, or it could act as intelligence, or it could act as manas. So depending upon how this subtle body is acting, it is termed one of those 4 things. It's a different way of looking at those subtle ingredients of the subtle body. But the common point is false ego, the turning the back on Krishna. And polluted mind, polluted intelligence, polluted consciousness imagines that I am the center, and tries in illusion to organize the universe around himself. Now, when someone is thinking like that, we immediately put him in Bombay traffic and try to organize the universe around you. It just simply doesn't work, but it doesn't work anywhere. The mosquitoes show us this, because each mosquito is thinking that I am the center, and I'm going, and when he looks at you, or I don't know if it's a he or a she actually, but when they look at you, they think that you are meant simply for their pleasure. You are food for them. That's anamaya kosha. And that's how, this is exactly what Maya does. And this is exactly what false ego does. That so much of the Bhagavatam in the 11th canto and so many of the cantos, they're really meant to, in the 5th canto especially, they're really meant to show us that there's nothing in existence separate from Krishna. Nothing can exist separate from Krishna, because he is the Param Satyam. He is the absolute truth. Nothing exists separate from him. What Maya does is it places a curtain, a cloud in front of our consciousness. It places a cloud of false ego in front of our consciousness, where instead of seeing everything in relationship to Krishna, we see everything in relationship to me and my enjoyment. That is specifically what Maya does. Specifically that. It gives us a sense of illusory separation, that things, a vision that things are separated from Krishna. So Narada Muni in his previous life, and his name in his previous life was Ubhavarana. He had gifts. He had gifts of beauty, physical strength, and he could sing like a Gandharva, because he was a Gandharva, but a very expert Gandharva. And he used that. Oh, listen to the next verse, and it really shows what the problem is. Once, ekada, one time, Deva Shatru Te, in the assembly of all the devatas, the demigods, the Gandharvas and the Apsaras were invited, and the purpose of this assembly, and the purpose of Narada Muni being, or Upabarana being invited, it was a Sankirtan festival where everyone would chant the holy names of the Lord. And the Sanskrit words used here is Hari, Gata, Upagayane. Specifically it says Hari for Lord Hari. It was a festival where everyone would sing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That was the purpose of the festival, and it was called by the Prajapatis. So during that festival was when Narada Muni, bewildered, next verse, Narada Muni continued, Helanam Sepura Ojasa Yahi Tvam Sudratam Asu Nasta Shri Krita Helana. So Narada Muni explains his situation by saying, I was invited to that festival, and I also joined that festival, and surrounded by beautiful women, I began musically singing the glories of the devatas, of the demigods. Now, when he was singing in this way, his purpose really wasn't to glorify the devatas even and the festival was for Hari Katha, Upagayante, it was to glorify Lord Hari. But he wasn't even really singing, he wasn't singing for Lord Hari, he wasn't singing for the demigods, he was singing to attract and to please and subtly enjoy pleasures with these beautiful apsaras, these beautiful ladies. He was keeping himself in the center. He was using his opulence. He was using his opulence that is meant to serve Krishna at that festival to serve his own pleasures. And herein lies a problem that every conditioned soul faces. So what happened to him? Helanam Sepo Ojasa, the Prajapatis, seeing that his mood and his mentality was opposite of what it is supposed to be, they cursed him, seeing his neglect, his helanam, seeing his neglect, helanam sepur, with great power, they issued a curse on him with these words, Yahitwam Sudratam Asu. Asu means immediately or quickly. You immediately lose all your opulences and become a Sudra with no opulence, with no abilities, with no beauty, with no intelligence, with no singing ability. All the things that you proudly considered to be yours. And this is something that's painful but wonderful as we become older, and I have so much experience of this by now, is that all the things that we think of, what we're proud of when we're young. When I was young, I could run all day long. Not all day long, not really that long. But I used to be able to run for kilometers and kilometers, for hours actually, and never become tired. Now it's difficult for me to walk. I thought that was me. I was so proud of that actually. Sometimes my friends would take a bus somewhere, and I would proudly wave to them as they got on the bus, and then I would run and be where they were getting off before they got off. And I was so proud of that. And this may surprise you, but at one time I had hair, and I was very proud of that. But I was also envious. When you have something that you're proud of, when someone has more of it than you, which is now everyone except the brahmacharis over here, then you become envious of it. So I used to, this is what it's like being a teenager, at least it was in those days, that I used to have curly hair. It's hard to believe, isn't it? But I used to stand in front of a mirror trying to make that curly hair into straight hair, because one of my friends not only had curly hair, but his hair was more blonde than mine. Just thinking about it is very difficult. So I used to, and it would, to no avail. It just wouldn't straighten out, and it wouldn't become blonde either. So this is a problem when you look at whatever you have and try to enjoy it. You always find someone who has more than you, or a greater amount than you, and then one's heart becomes filled with envy and remorse. And even worse than that, especially when one is old, when one is having trouble walking, and one used to be able to run, and one used to be good looking, and then one sees the young people. One sees the young people, and they can run, and they're beautiful and good looking and strong, and then one can easily fall into the trap of thinking, only if I could run again. Only whatever I'm lacking in this life, if only when one is old, if only I had done this, if only I knew Sanskrit, if only if I could play the harmonium and sing like that Prabhu so sweetly. If only. So when we become filled with these if onlys, only if this and only if that, these are seeds that we are planting for our next birth. So very dangerous, this desiring thing, and this point comes up again and again and again. The 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, our situation, why we're in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is so important. What is the Sanskrit name of the chapter? Purushottam Yoga, the English name, the Yoga of the Supreme Person, describes why we are situated in a particular body or situation. It's all based on desire. And Prabhupada says in one of his purports that the living entity is situated in his position just like, because of his desire, just like the tree is situated upon the reflection of water on the reservoir. So in any case, this one has to be very careful. To be careful about our desiring. And this is what we're actually meant to do as devotees or aspiring devotees, increase our spiritual desires. And if we neglect to do that, of course Krishna's mercy is there, but we want to increase our spiritual desires because that will, this comes out in so many places in the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, Param Dvistvanavardhite. This will remove the constant remembrance of Krishna, will remove from all the impurities within the heart. Impurities means desires born of passion and ignorance, and ultimately even goodness. So he was cursed. Narada Muni was cursed in a very heavy way. Become Nasta Sri, you will have no more beauty, because you think this beauty is your blessing, but it's actually turning into your curse because you're not using it properly. The very thing that a person who's bathing in the ocean of false ego thinks is his blessing, actually it's his curse, because it entangles him further and further in this dreaded ocean of material existence where there is just repeated birth and death. So immediately you become a Sudra. So this section from the 7th canto ends and with Narada Muni saying that he did take his birth as a Sudra, and we'll describe in the next section from the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam in the 5th chapter how unfortunate and difficult his circumstances were. The word difficult, his circumstances were difficult, and this pastime it shows us that the blessing can become the curse, and the difficulty, which no one wants, can really become a blessing. And the material existence is so kind to us, I have noticed, that it will always give us difficulties, which is much easier to preach to others about than when something difficult is happening to me. So there was a blessing, and we'll hear about that blessing. Now, maybe you can put on the projector where it says the 4 truths. One story and one projector. And the resolution isn't right, it's too big. Okay. But it's saying, the point that we'll put up here as the first of the 4 truths is that there are 2 points, but I only put it up as one. One is something that Narada Muni not Narada Muni, Raghunath Das Goswami. Okay, just go ahead. One is, which I didn't put up, is what Raghunath Das Goswami says. He says, Sada Hitva Damba. His first instruction in his Manasiksha is always give up pride. There are actually good things one could be proud of, but most of the things we are proud of are not so good. One time, Prabhupada actually said that in a letter, that there are spiritual things that are gifts that one could be proud of, in the sense, but it's a different kind of pride. We're proud that we have such glorious masters that have benedicted us with these gifts. So here's the first point. Now, when we're in difficulty, okay, could you please read that? Who will read that? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Loudly.
The root cause of our current suffering is difficult to discern and therefore complicated to dissolve.
Yes, because say I'm in a difficulty right now, but what was the cause of that difficulty? It may have happened like in Narada Muni's case, in my previous birth, and I'm trying to deal with it on this level. I'm trying to move the obstacle that superficially presents itself to me in my birth, in this year, in this month, in this day. So we don't know what the root cause and why we're suffering from this difficulty. It's very hard to discern, very hard to understand. So actually to remove a difficulty takes a different kind of methodology. Not just to give it some medicine, because unless the Supreme Lord sanctifies the potency of that medicine, it won't work. Not to do this or do that. Yes, we have to act practically, but simply practically won't be sufficient to remove the actual cause of the difficulty. So there are actually two lessons I found in this, and there may be hundreds of others. But one was give up pride, and the second is please be aware that we do so many things, so many remedial measures, so many when the difficulties present themselves to us, but it doesn't work. We try to make some kind of change. But that doesn't remove the problem. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, that even if you go to the forest, you take your forehead with you, because in those days they would, instead of reading the palm of someone and know what kind of person he was or what kind of fate he had, they would read the forehead, which is a lot more practical, because when you meet someone, they're going like this and you can't see what they're like, but their forehead is right there in front of you. Did you know people used to read foreheads before? Yes? Yeah. Can you read foreheads? I'm just curious. You? Oh. Are you sure? Sometimes these forehead readers are very clever. They'll never admit it. Okay. So the next section we're going to read is where Narada Muni's life picks up. Just imagine if every time you lost energy you could change your battery. But we operate on solar energy. That's a joke. Solar energy, get it? Soul. Funny, yes? Yes?
Prabhuji, you said there are two solutions. One is to give up pride, and the second one?
Not two solutions, but two lessons to learn. And the first one was to give up pride, and the second one was up there, right there. To understand that the reason why it's so difficult to remove a difficulty is because we don't know what the cause is. In the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, there's a description of how bamboo, Sukadeva Goswami talks about, you cut down the bamboo and remove the bamboo, but because the root is still there, it will grow again. So you don't know the cause of what the actual difficulty is, so it grows again. This is the tendency. So here Narada Muni, and this is the... So he begins, this is in the fifth chapter of the first canto, he begins speaking again. So in the last millennium, a long time ago, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant, engaged in the services of Brahmins who were following the principles of Vedanta. So there was a maidservant, and there was a Brahmana who had something like a hotel or a motel where people would come and stay for some time, overnight sometime, and sometimes they would stay for months and months, as in the case of these Bhakti Vedantas, these Brahmana Bhakti Vedantas, who during the Chatumasya, they stayed in this one place for 4 months. And at that time, Narada Muni's mother, his name wasn't Narada Muni at that time, but his mother had some menial service there. It doesn't say exactly what her service was, but she was doing something very, very humble. And Narada Muni, a 5-year-old boy, naturally was assisting her and taking care of the guests. So at this particular time, the guests were these brahmanas, these Bhaktivedantas, who had been traveling, who only travel, move from place to place. And during the rainy season, they stay at one place. Now, and during that rainy season, they stay at one place, but they very, very strictly follow rules and regulations. Their life is very regulated in the one place they stay for the 4 months, and the rest of the time they're wandering, just moving from place to place. Now, why? Usually we follow things because we're told to follow things, which is good. But it's very helpful to know why. Very, very often, if we know why something is there, a rule or a regulation is there, then it gives us more strength and determination to follow things. So why, in the 4 months of the rainy season, were these Bhaktivedantas sitting in one place and following these strict rules and regulations, and the rest of the time they were wandering from here to there? And do you know why? No. But I'll tell you why. It's very, very simple. When you travel a lot, because right now, when I'm living in one place and all people have their own apartments or even their own rooms, they will know this is true. There's such a tendency to accumulate things. More and more and more and more and more. And we don't really need all the things that we accumulate. There's a difference between what we want and what we need. So in spiritual life, one of the principles is to try to limit our possessions to what we really need, not just we want, because a house tends to fill up and our room tends to fill up with all kinds of things that we just want. And why do we want them? Because we think they're going to be the source of our happiness. So in brahmacharya life, etc., we're taught to minimize things. And in the beginning, it may be difficult, but it's just imagine these poor brahmacharis. They can't even have a smartphone. They only have these what's the operating system on the on what? On the
Android?
No, more primitive. I don't know. I thought it was Java. Yes, is it Java? In any case, can you imagine these poor Brahmanas? Raise your hand if you have a Java phone right now, or don't have a smartphone. Who will admit it? You have a smartphone? Raise your hand if you just have one that you can't run WhatsApp on. That's easy. You can't. Can you imagine these poor people? How do they exist? And still they're sitting here? How is it possible? Because I mean, I need mine. I couldn't live without it. And we have unlimited things like that. So here's the thing. When you're traveling and going from place to place, especially when you're walking and you have to carry everything with you on your own back. I knew a devotee many years ago who, there was a war in the Ukraine, and they were all trying to go west. So many of the people, they were leaving the war, and they had to leave their houses behind. And what do you do when you have to leave your place? You take all your valuables with you. All the things that you want to take, you take with you. But just imagine if you have to carry them on your back. You have to carry them because there's no other way. So he explained to me that on the road that they were all traveling on, there were tables and lamps and pianos or whatever, and they didn't have computers in those days, but there were things just people were throwing away, because they wanted them, but they didn't need them, and they couldn't carry them. So this is the glory of traveling in this way, is that you end up having to simplify your life to what you really need, especially again when you're walking like that. So during the rainy season, so the sadhus would just walk from place to place, and they carried just a very minimum. I've seen, I could tell you other stories about even devotees that I know that who've traveled around in Braj, where the culture, of course, is supported with nothing. I mean, not nothing, but just not just a gamcha and a set of clothes, or not even a set of clothes. And when the weather is warm, you travel, you put on the gamcha, you wash your clothes, and you hang them up somewhere until it dries, and you sit and chant or rest a little bit, and then when they dry, you just keep on walking. And I once read a book by a renunciant, a sadhu who was basically a tantric yogi, but he said people don't understand the freedom that a sadhu who is detached actually has. Because at any time you can just get up and just leave, and you can carry it with you. I mean, yes. So free. You can live anywhere, under a tree. We've heard the Goswamis used to live. So free. That means free from anxieties too. So these sadhus, so when the sadhus in the rainy season, because they can't travel because it's the rainy season and it's muddy and the roads are all washed out and the rivers are overflowing, so they have to stay in one place. So even though they are sadhus, they're staying in one place so they don't accumulate and make material attachments. They follow very strictly the rules and regulations of Chatamasya during the 4 months of the rainy season. So these sadhus, they were living together, and this little 5-year-old boy, Nardamuni, later it comes out that he's just 5 years old, with his impoverished mother. He doesn't know who his father is. He doesn't have a father. I move my hands too much. What to do? Krishna gave me hands. I better use them in his service. Or we might take them away. So they were living together in the rainy season. So, and what did they do? What is the essence? So they were chanting and talking about Krishna continuously. They were chanting and talking about Krishna continuously, especially during their times together in the rainy season. They would talk about Krishna, they would talk about Krishna, they would chant the glories of Krishna. So this little boy who didn't know anything, but he had a natural inclination, as young boys do, they had a natural inclination to serve. And he was humble because he was born in such a humble circumstance. He had nothing to be proud of. So he, on behalf of the owner of the place and his mother, he was serving these sadhus. Now here comes an interesting point. He was engaged in their personal service. Please get this for me, get that for me. He would bring their prasadam, he would wash their plates, things like that. Simple things, because he's just a young boy. So the next verse says in 24, although they were impartial by nature, that they don't make distinctions, they're kind to everyone, pandita samadarshana. Those followers of Vedanta, these Bhakti Vedantas, they blessed him with their causeless mercy. So it's an interesting point that they see equally and they want to bless everyone. And they're not partial by nature. I like you, I don't like you, I like this one, I don't like. They see equally and they want to bless everyone. But yet they blessed him, even though practically speaking he had no qualification at all, just a young boy. But yet, he acted in such a way that attracted that causeless mercy. Because the mercy is a haituki, it is causeless. It can't be forced. You can't, it's not like a business where you put down this amount of money and you get this amount of goods. You can put down, you can give your life in 1,000 ways and you can give up everything, but you can't force a powerful sadhu to give you his mercy, because it's causeless. It springs from his free will or Krishna's inspiration. It's not business at all. If I give myself in this way, then he must do. It doesn't work like that. But yet, if we act in certain ways, that will attract that causeless mercy, not enforce it, but attract it. So what was Narada Muni's qualifications, or not qualifications, how did he act that attracted that causeless mercy? He says, I was self-controlled, I had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty. He didn't even play cricket. And he didn't even root for India when they played Pakistan. Just imagine how detached he was. In addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required. So these Bhakti Vedantas, they had a consciousness. They were Krishna conscious. They were getting such a taste because of their deep Krishna consciousness. They could wander in a detached way, and when they were during the rainy season, they just sat and just talked about Krishna. Once only, Narada Muni continues, by their permission, just once, I took the remnants of their food. He got their Mahamaprasad. And by so doing, all my sins were once eradicated. This is when one reads it in the Antya Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the final chapters, when Mahaprabhu tastes the uchista, the Mahaprasadam, the way he describes, has anyone read that? How Mahaprabhu describes the non-otherworldly, the transcendental taste that he's experiencing when he tastes the Mahaprasadam of Lord Jagannath, or, excuse me, of Lord Jagannath. He goes into such ecstasy just by tasting Mahaprasadam. So Narada Muni took their permission, and one time alone he took that, and it removed all his sins. Thus, being engaged, continuing his dealing with them, I became purified in heart. Now listen to this next line over here. Tadharma evatma ruchi pajayate. At that time, the very nature of the transcendentalists, of the Bhaktivedantas, became attractive to me. So, because he was serving them, because he got their mercy, because he wasn't controlled by passion and ignorance, by being with them, he could distinguish, even though he was a young boy, between these different tastes, the material taste and the spiritual taste. Now, if one stands in front of C.C. Radha Rasbihari, why do all these people every day go to the arti and stand in front of Radha Rasbihari and C.C. Gauratai, Srila Prabhupada, stand in front of Sita Ram Lakshman? Because, of course, there's the cultural element. All you have to do is have a temple with beautiful deities and so many people will come. But why do they keep coming? Because there's a different flavor in the atmosphere. There's a different, almost subtle fragrance in the atmosphere. There's a different taste. Because this is what deities are. This is what the Bhagavatam is. This is what a good kirtan is. This is what can happen every time we chant japa of the holy names. This is what can happen when we take prasadam. This is what can happen when we go to Sri Vrindavan Dham or Sri Dham Mayapur or Jagannath Puri. That the atmosphere is different. Srila Prabhupada even said about Vrindavan that even a non-devotee who comes to Vrindavan can experience separation from Krishna. There's just something different there. When you go down the road or the Yamuna Expressway or whatever, or the Agra Expressway, and suddenly you enter Braj, then just there's something different. And what it is that happens with the holy names, with the Bhagavatam, with the deities, this is the merciful descent into the dark material world. Golokeda Premadana Harinama Sankirtan. This is the descent of the divine, the descent of transcendence into the material world. And if your consciousness is a little bit subtle, you can perceive the difference between the taste of one, of material pleasures, and the taste of the other. Spiritual, the divine's entrance into our consciousness by the mercy of the divine. So the way I look at it is, I stand in front of the deities. And sometimes when I stand in front of the deities, I'll be there, I'll go to an arti, and then I'll walk out and someone will say, what color clothes were the deities wearing? And I'll say, I won't say it, but I'll feel very embarrassed because I'll have no idea. Because although I was there, I wasn't there. My mind was completely distracted. This is once when I was in Jagannath Puri, it's a lengthy story, so maybe I won't bother. But I'll bother. I just tell part of it. But once I was right in front of the sink. Raise your hand if you've been to Jagannath Puri. Oh, that's everyone. Okay. So I was standing in front of the Singadwar. I was waiting for something, for someone. And I was standing in front of a shop. And the shopkeeper, as shopkeepers tend to do, they want to have a conversation with you. So to bring you into their shop with a great hope that you'll purchase something. So I was just standing there and the shopkeeper said, "How are you?" And I said, I didn't want to purchase anything. So I said, "Not very good." So he said, "Why?" And then I said something that's true, but I said it in a completely superficial mood. I said, "Because I cannot go see Lord Jagannath. I'm not allowed into the temple." But it was just completely superficial. I wasn't actually feeling separation from Lord Jagannath. So he said to me, "Oh yes, you can see him. Just step up here into my shop." but he was actually he was very sincere. So I stepped up, and then he said, "Look over here. There's Petit Pavan Jagannath. He's right there. You can see him." And then I immediately understood that all over the world I go to temples and I see Lord Jagannath, but usually I don't really see Lord Jagannath at all. Of course I don't really see Lord Jagannath at all, because we heard how when Mahaprabhu sees Lord Jagannath, he sees him in a completely different way. But I don't see Lord Jagannath because my mind is so dumpy and not filled with devotion. So I thought I should just see Petit Pavan Jagannath and just accept this. So ever since then, whenever I passed the Singadwar, I would, just like the other pilgrims, I would take off my shoes and stand in front of Petit Pavan Jagannath and pray to him. And I found that he's so merciful. He's so kind and so merciful. So when we stand in front of the deities, so I got a taste for that. There's a lot more to the story, but maybe I'll save it for another day. But when we stand in front of the deities with proper consciousness, then we're in a different realm. And depending upon how deep our consciousness is, we enter more or less deeply into Goloka Vrindavan, practically speaking. But yet it's always different. It's always special. So then after standing in front of the deities for some time, even if I enter a little bit and perceive that the atmosphere is special, it's not of this world, then I walk out. And then I forget. And I rejoin the rest of my life and the rest of my consciousness. And then at a different time, I come in again. And then I enter this world. And then after some time, I exit that world. And I'm back into my old self-centered consciousness. So it seems to me that, and this will be proved later on in the story of Narada Muni, that at some point in our life, as we start distinguishing between the different tastes between material consciousness and spiritual consciousness, the different tastes being in the presence of the deity of Radharasa Vihari and not being in the presence by consciousness, I'm talking about, or being in the presence of the holy names by consciousness, at some point we want more and more that taste of being with Krishna by the mercy of the descent of these of transcendence into our consciousness. The holy names, the deities, the Bhagavatam, the devotees, and the Dham. There just comes a point, we go back and forth, and at some point, and we will say, and it may not be in this life, but at some point we're going to say, I've had enough. of going out of this consciousness. I've had enough. I'm just going to stay with the holy names, with the deities in Krishna Katha, and I'm not going to leave. I've had enough. I've had enough. I've had enough. What are we going to do? Maybe rubber band with glue. Okay. So at some point, the soul makes a choice that I don't want material consciousness anymore. I don't want to imagine myself in the center. We imagine ourselves in the center, but we can't convince anyone, not even one person, that we're the center. This is my experience. Not one person, especially my wife. Don't tell her I said that. No, because it's not true. She's very, very kind to me. That's like the first years of marriage life. Is like this struggle between the husband trying to remake his wife into this dream he has about what a wife should be, and the wife trying to remake her husband into this dream she has of what a husband should be. And then they fight until they have a child, and there's no question about who's the boss and who's the center when you have a child. Anyway, this is just an interesting fact I've observed. So he, Narada Muni, by his open-heartedness and by by them blessing him, the result was that the very nature of the transcendentalists became attractive to him. What was in their heart, the taste that they had, free from passion, ignorance, and even goodness, that taste was planted into his heart. It may not have blossomed, and actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the Bhakti Lata Bija is ruchi. It's a taste. It's a taste that I want this. I want this realm. My hope is no longer in this world, the world of false ego, the world of shadows, the world of ashes. But it's in the transcendental realm. There's a taste, and that taste will only grow, as we were saying, until it takes over. It can take a long time, it can take a short time, it depends on so many things. We can best to understand it depends on our sincerity. So Narada Muni, by his simplicity of heart, by his lack of pride, by his lack of false ego, basically, and his service to them, he would listen to them speaking Krishna Katha, he would serve them, and he attracted their mercy. And the taste that they had, the heart that they had, the consciousness that they had became attractive to him. And he wanted that. And that, practically speaking, was Prabhupada's secret. That was the secret of Prabhupada's success. We can say it in terms of he was empowered by Krishna as a Avesha avatar, we can say that. But I like to think of it more that Prabhupada carried with him his taste, and that taste was clearly Vrindavan. And when one was with Prabhupada, when I think of it like he had a bubble around him, and you'd walk into his room thinking with so many problems, and he would say, "So everything is all right?" And really everything, generally speaking, everything was all right. And then you'd walk out of the bubble, and then your mind would, there was a sweetness that he carried with him that made souls, attracted souls, and they wanted to be in that bubble. They wanted to have that taste because they had already had enough of the tastes of this world, and maybe they weren't pure, maybe this, maybe that. And actually, once I was in Prabhupada's bubble, but my mind was much stronger than his. I can't say it really like that, but my mind was very strong, and I thought, I'm more miserable now than just being with Prabhupada, and I can understand why. Is because you feel worse in one sense when you're in the presence of the sun, but you have the curtains are closed and you're wearing black all around you. And so I asked Prabhupada, I was thinking, how am I going to ask this question to him? So I asked him, why is it that sometimes when you're in the presence of a pure soul, you feel liberated and everything is so sweet, and other times you feel just the opposite, so trapped? And he answered in a very simple way, and he said that the intoxication of Maya is very strong. Another time, one devotee sitting in Hare Krishna land on the roof of the building. The devotee was from California, Los Angeles, Southern California, and he said to Prabhupada, because remember we are very young and innocent, Prabhupada, this looks just like Southern California with the palm trees. And Prabhupada said, yes, you brought it with you. Because we don't really see with our eyes, we see with our minds. We see with our minds. Oh, this is really important topic that we won't talk about right now. But when we purify our consciousness, then, and depending upon who we associate with, we'll get different tastes. Once in 1975 in Melbourne, someone in Prabhupada was giving a class in the town hall in Melbourne, and someone asked him, how do you become sincere? And Prabhupada replied, and he was sitting on the stage with devotees surrounding him, and Prabhupada replied, how do you become a drunkard? And then he said, if you want to become a drunkard, associate with drunkards. And if you want to be sincere, and then he pointed to the devotees sitting around, and I was sitting in the audience, he said, associate with them. And I was thinking, whew, I'm glad I'm sitting in the audience at this point. Because that's such a weight, actually, such a responsibility about being a devotee, especially all devotees, but especially those living in the temple, because that's what Prabhupada wanted, everyone come and take the association of the devotees. So it's such a weight, such a responsibility to be that sincere that by association others will become more sincere. It's a very strong weight. And the devotees who take this seriously, and as a service, my service is to become more and more sincere, more and more taste in Krishna consciousness, less and less taste in the material world. That the weight of that service will carry them back to Krishna. But what a weight. But of course, not only those living in the temple, but all those who are devotees really should pick up that weight. And yes, let me become more and more sincere, and let me help others. So that taste became attractive to Narada Muni. Maybe it wasn't fully blossomed, as it turns out, as we shall hear tomorrow, but yet it was there. And that taste is of, I want to be with Krishna. I don't want things of this world. Maybe I have my contaminations or whatever, but I don't want anything of this world. I want to be with Krishna. I want to serve Krishna. I want to chant Krishna's holy names. I want to give everyone the gift of Krishna consciousness. My heart to be pure. That taste is our wealth. And that taste should be really protected. This is the subject of Rupa Shiksha, the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami, Brahmanda Brahmate Konyabhai, Ihan Mali Nitya Sechi Shravanadita. That taste is our wealth. Other things are not our wealth. Other things may be our wealth temporarily, but we will have to leave each and every one of those things behind as we walk through the doorway of when we leave the body. But that is ours forever. Think for a moment of what gives you the most taste. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, by the way, but what gives you the most taste in Krishna consciousness? Oh, I didn't mean that you should just call it out either, but just think to yourself, because this is very, very private too, because you have to deal with this. You're the one who has to make that taste grow. Not have to in the sense of you have no choice, but have to in the sense of it's in our own interest, and to hurt that taste is not in our interest. So just think for a moment of what gives you the most taste in Krishna consciousness, and think for a moment of what you could do to cultivate that taste. Just privately to yourself, what can you do to cultivate that taste, to make it grow, and stop it from and what can you do to stop it from wilting, dwindling? Just think for a moment what gives you taste and how you can make it grow. And then perhaps offer a prayer to Guru, Vaishnavas, to Srila Prabhupada, to your worshipable deities, to Nityananda Prabhu, to Mahaprabhu. Just offer a prayer that, unless you're merciful to me, what hope do I have? I'll try my best, but please give me a drop of mercy. The reason why I stated it like that is because it's such I've seen it myself, to try to do things by my power, my strength, my intelligence, and I say, how many times have I said, from now on I'm going to listen to my round, from now on this, and from now on that, and from now on, and sometimes it can last 5 minutes, even from my now on, but with some mercy, some mercy from Krishna, and that's where the removal of the pride is so important, for mercy from Krishna, because we can't be a beggar if we think we're wealthy. We can't beg effectively. So the pride has to go. Sada damba hitva. O Vyasadeva, Narada Muni continues speaking. In that association, by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. He heard from them Krishna Katha, the very words are used here. Tantra Vaham Krishna Katha Pragayatam. I heard from them Krishna Katha, their taste in Krishna, in Krishna's pastimes, by the process of hearing and by the process of his sincerity, Narada's sincerity, that's Ihan Mali Nitya Sekshi Shravanada Jal, that caused his taste, the seed, to sprout and grow. So we could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna, and thus, listening attentively, my taste, Narada says, for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. So when we, because hearing from them was touching transcendence. It's the water that makes our devotional creeper grow. So therefore, his taste, because of their taste, because of the touching of their consciousness to his consciousness, by the process of them speaking and him hearing, caused his taste to grow. Increase step at every step. And now the process of bhakti is described, of advancement. O great sage, as soon as I got a taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching. It became fixed nishta. He had that taste and he didn't want anything other than that. And as my taste developed, and that's not the end, it develops more, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both the Lord and I are transcendental. We won't realize this. Actually, there's one comment of Sripad Madhvacharya in the Bhagavatam when he says that we won't actually realize that we are not our body until the Lord, when He wants, blesses us with that realization. When we need it. When our desire is strong, then we need it. When our desire is strong, then Krishna will give us. When our taste increases, when our sincerity increases, then Krishna will give us whatever we need. The problem is not that there's a lack, that the problem is my sincerity. Prabhupada was once asked, one of the devotees at 26 Second Avenue asked him about he had studied philosophy, so he asked him about so many Western philosophers. Is he Krishna conscious? Is Kierkegaard Krishna conscious? Is Hegel Krishna conscious? Is Schopenhauer Krishna conscious? Is this one Krishna conscious? And Prabhupada just said, their sincerity is their Krishna consciousness. So really, that's the key. And how do you become more sincere? How do I become more sincere? Just ask yourself that question. Because it's so easy to just say the answers, because we know all the answers. You've all studied. But ask yourself that question, how do I become more sincere? Now, I've already done the wrong thing in this class. I've talked too much, because unless I really want to go fast in the last 10 minutes, and then there won't be any time for questions, and then we'll save the questions for the third class. Yeah. Okay, ready? We're going to talk fast and explain everything. And this will bring us to the second point. Thus, during the 2 seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great soul sages constantly. This is what they were doing. Was their taste. This is what they were doing. I heard these great soul sages constantly chant the unadulterated, the pure glories of Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished. So the more his taste increased, the more he heard, the more his taste increased, the more he was in their association and served. Passion and ignorance decreased in him. I was very much attached to those sages. I was gentle in behavior, and all my sins were eradicated, removed in their service. And in my heart, I had strong faith in them. Look what he was experiencing in their association. I had subjugated the senses. He was controlling his mind and senses, and I was strictly following them with body and mind. He was fully fixed and moving forward. But the 4 months were about to end, and they were going to leave because they were traveling Bhaktivedantas, traveling sadhus, and the rainy season was about to end. But as they were leaving, those Bhaktivedantas who were very kind to poor-hearted souls, very kind to the humble and meek, very kind to those who feel themselves in need of mercy. They instructed me in that most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself. So they gave him a gift. Because usually, when we see, I mean, this is my experience that I've watched holy men, devotees, and dealing with congregation members especially, or not congregation, just people who come to see them. And they always say two things. First is, please come to my house. And the second is, what? What do they say? Please give me your blessings. 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 As if the sages are like some kind of blessing ATM or something like that. This is... But if we do our part, because they're naturally kind-hearted, they will give us our blessings. They will give us their blessings. But we want them to do their part, but our minds should be on doing our part to attract their blessings. Yeah. So what was their blessings, though? What did it say? Who was listening carefully? What was their blessings? Raise your hand. Yes?
They imparted the confidential knowledge about the personality.
They instructed him. Yes, thank you. They gave him instructions. So when we think of blessings, we tend to think of it like boing, jadoo or something. So all my problems go away, my stocks increase in value, and my enemies all have troubles. And this is. But the real blessings, I mean, those kind of blessings are there for sure. I mean, not that kind of blessings, but if a great soul prays for you, then that is extremely helpful. But the great blessing is instructions, which puts the weight on us to follow the instructions, and that's generally not the kind of blessings that people want. They want the jadoo blessings. So I don't have to do any work. But we don't get things like that, even if they say yes, it'll just be shallow and superficial. If we act sincerely, then the blessings will come. But these blessings and instructions are so important. And that's the second and final truth that we're going to talk about. Now life's challenges should be viewed through the lens of transcendental knowledge. Those instructions are transcendental knowledge. And we should view our life not through our mind alone, but through the instructions that we get from the Bhaktivedantas, from the holy people, from Shastra. We need to put on those glasses. We need to change how we view the world to the view of Shastra, Shastra Chakshus. So Prabhupada in his purport speaks about the jiva and the living entities. And what I would like to talk about, which is the confidential knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, which Krishna, the Lord himself, spoke. But Srila Jiva Goswami, in his purport to this verse, describes the instructions as the Chatusloki Bhagavatam. The Chatusloki Bhagavatam, the Bhagavatam in 4 seed verses, the whole Bhagavatam in 4 verses. Now, I'm going to say them and what in very, very brief and in summary, what the instructions are. I won't be able to. Maybe you can just go to the other. Yes, the 4 verses. How many of you know the Chatusloki Bhagavatam verses? Raise your hand. Not so many, but they're very important because the whole Bhagavatam in 4 verses. So the first one is Aham eva samevagay nanya yat satparam kascharaham yaritatya yovisasheta sosmaham. And the basic idea is that Krishna says that I existed before the creation. Before anything existed, I was there. And after everything in existence is annihilated, destroyed, it no longer exists, Krishna is there. And in between, when things exist, whatever exists is not different from Krishna. Of course, it's his energies. We'll speak about that in a moment. But there's nothing other than Krishna that exists. And obviously, we don't mean this in the sense of impersonalism, but we're achintya abhed, that the Lord is simultaneously everything and separate from everything at the same time. So there's nothing that exists where Krishna isn't there. That means that in the difficulties that we face, he is also there. There's something from Krishna in there. There's no situation, no place, no time, no object where Krishna doesn't exist. That's what he says in the first verse. In the second verse, if you see, I'm going to, because I spoke too much unfortunately before, I have to go through this a little quickly. But if you see something, the second verse describes what Maya does. The first is what's reality and what is Maya. Second verse. So this is Sambandha Gyan. That if you see something and think that it's separate from Krishna, well, in fact, as according to the first verse spoken by the Lord, nothing is separate from him. If you think something is separate from him, that is in fact Maya. To see any situation, any place, any object, as if it's not connected to Krishna, that's the covering of Maya over our eyes. And the example that is given is Yatho Vasho Yatha Tamat. It's like the reflection of an object into a dark room and thinking that reflected object is the object. I hope that's clear. Maybe I'll speak about it tomorrow. It's just Maya, it's illusion. You're seeing reality where it is not. You're in Maya, you see illusion, something separate from Krishna. The third verse, so those 2 verses are Sambandha Gyan. The third verse is Prayojana, or the great necessity, which means love for Krishna. This is the Bhagavatam in 4 slokas. Yatamahanti bhutani bhuteshu chesvachesvanu pravastani pravastani yatateshu neteshvam. Now this is the most difficult of the four verses. And this verse means that just as, say, this is made out of wood, it's made out of air, it's made out of akash, ether, it's made out of water, but it doesn't, this desk or anything doesn't contain the totality of earth, water, air, fire, and ether. Those elements exist outside, although they exist inside. Is that clear? The elements exist outside of everything and also inside of everything. So that what makes us see the air and everything inside and outside. So that's the question. And the example is, that's the example. And the question is Krishna. The point is that Krishna is outside of everything. He's in Goloka Vrindavan, Mama Angsateva Sambhava, his energies pervade everything. But also he's in everything, he's everywhere. So what is it that allows us to see Krishna everywhere? What is it that gives us the vision that wherever we look, we see Krishna? And that is prema, premanjana turita bhakti vilochanena. So in this way, this vision is described in the Prayojana verse of the Chatusloki Bhagavatam. Yomam Pashyati Sarvatra. Anyone know that verse? Loudly. Yomam Pashyati Sarvatra. Yes. For one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, I'm never lost. But you can't do it without prema. Prabhupada once called it prema, as he said, the magic wand that allows you to see Krishna everywhere. It changes the vision. Krishna's already there, but our vision gets changed by prema. So obviously these four verses could be spoken about for weeks and weeks by great souls. And but the next verse is how to achieve this, the Avideya Tattva. And the next verse explains that Etavadeva Gigyasam Tattva Gigyasanam, by either direct method or the indirect method, there is nothing else to be learned in this world other than this. How to see Krishna. Prema is what is to be learned. Prema, bhakti, is that which is to be gained. We put so many other things as what we want and what we think we need, necessities, but it is prema that is the prayojana. It is love for Krishna that is the true necessity. And there is nothing else. This is the fourth verse. This is the purpose of all inquiry, direct or indirect. Direct means I could say this paper is white in color. That's anvyo. Vyatirek means it is not black in color, it is not green in color, it is not orange. Indirect way of describing. Okay, so they gave him, we'll talk about this tomorrow. I did rush through it a bit. So they gave him this knowledge that there's nothing but Krishna. And to see anything other than Krishna is Maya. And that if you have prema, love for Krishna, you'll be able to see Krishna everywhere. And this is what is to be gained by all inquiry, by all attempts. It is this that is to be gained, prema bhakti. Those in very brief summary, that's the four verses. And then, after giving him this knowledge, by that confidential knowledge, and then there's a little description, but it's already a little past time. So we'll begin with that tomorrow, Krishna willing. So the second point, again, go back, please. The second point was this knowledge is like a lens. It's a way to view the world. No, the truth, second truth. That life's challenges, because again the topic was how to view the difficulties of life. Life's challenges, you have to cover it when you do this, because everyone just gets into Windows mode. We look at what icons are there. So life's challenges should be viewed through knowledge, not just by our mind's view of them and the stresses and happiness of the mind, but we should view it through that's the purpose of transcendental knowledge, to be able to give us a lens by which we can actually discern what to do in life. Okay, it's so late and you listened so attentively, and I talked and didn't leave any time for questions. And not only that, I talked and my voice isn't very strong, and I'm not going to answer any questions after the class is over. But there's 2 more classes, and because my voice gets very weak, and if I lose it, I don't know where to find it again. So excuse me for that. So it's hard to end a class without saying any questions, but instead I'm going to say thank you very much. You listen very attentively, even though it's so late at night, and I so much appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Sri Radha Rasa Bihari Lal ki jai.